Hello, my name is Richard Tamaro with CASO Document Management. Today we're going to talk about ApplicationXtender with ECM Toolbox and Accounts Payable Workflow. I'm going to take you through a PowerPoint to talk a bit about the solution, a little bit about the company, and then we'll head right into the system itself and give you a demonstration. Everybody on this demo are ApplicationXtender users, and so the demo is made around the fact that you know the base part of the solution. We are now adding the value and putting the workflow and the rest of the product on ApplicationXtender. So who is CASO? We've been working with you for a while, but it's good to step back and take a look at us because sometimes you don't realize everything we can do. We've been doing document management for over 20 years. We have 3 offices in New York, San Antonio, and Pittsburgh. Our technology team is actually very large, which has allowed us to create our own workflow and eForm and other modules that integrate tightly with ApplicationXtender and make ApplicationXtender better. We also do scanning, about 45 million pages a year. Sometimes we are scanning back files for customers. Sometimes we are at their site just scanning their records. We have some customers where we've had 3 to 7 people at their location for 3 to 10 years now, scanning their daily records. We also do receive work in our San Antonio office. So some of our customers have their mail being sent to San Antonio, or their emails, or they're scanning directly to our data entry team in the Texas facility. So that is an option on your invoice processing if you don't want to do the capture part of it. We are owners of ECM Toolbox software, which you'll see in a few minutes. The great part about that is we have a lot of control over the product. So if you need new features or functionality or something added to the solution, we can do that pretty quickly. ECM Toolbox, what is that? It's a suite of products to help you run your business, right? And specifically for this demo, it's around accounts payable, but it could be for human resources, could be for contracts, could be for onboarding. It works with ApplicationXtender, so it's a central repository or source of truth for your corporate records, and which has become very important over the last several months. It helps out and allows you to work from anywhere. Our customers that are using our workflow solution with ApplicationXtender have very quickly adjusted to working from home or working remotely. We've had customers who, before this even occurred, when we've had hurricanes and they weren't able to get to their facility, it was okay because they were able to continue working because all of their records that were arriving were being scanned and made immediately available in ApplicationXtender and a workflow for them to review and process. Okay, a little bit about ApplicationXtender for accounts payable. There's web-based single sign-on. There's rule-based routing, ad hoc routing, and I'll talk a little more about that in the next slide. Email notifications. So when records do arrive, you can be notified that they're there to be processed, or perhaps if an invoice has been sitting around for more than 2 weeks or is getting close to terms and a payment date, you can receive a notification. We look for duplicates, so if an invoice comes in and there's already one inside of AX, we'll flag that for you. We can set it up for terms and pay date monitoring around emails or little flags to be notified inside your workflow queue. And it gives your management team a really easy way and a quick way to review what invoices are out there, what is pending to be processed, is anything aging. There's other modules that come with ECM Toolbox Workflow, the standard workflow, right? So we're going to talk about specifically the accounts payable module for you, but standard is great for human resources, for onboarding, the other departments I discussed. We have a great eForm solution. We have also compliance packages and user efficiency package. These other areas 2, 3, and 4 could be their own demos by themselves. I'm just calling out to let you know that when you do acquire ECM Toolbox Workflow, you get a lot of modules and a lot of power. It's all wrapped up in one package. Let's talk about the big picture. What does the workflow look like? So records come in into ApplicationXtender, and they can come in through multiple methods. Could be scanners, dragging and dropping, faxes, multifunctional devices, network directories, emails could be arriving, and eForms. Emails is turning out to be bigger and bigger, especially with processing of records. There's also electronic data interchange, which I will talk a bit about how that could work for you. Once the records are inside of ApplicationXtender, the invoices can be viewed, or the purchase orders or the related documents, by your ApplicationXtender users. The invoices then are routed based on business rules or ad hoc to various users or groups of people for review and approval. While this is occurring, you'll have the people inside of AX that can see the process or the status of that invoice. They can tell that it's in the vice president of operations queue right now for review and approval. Or they can see that it was actually sent off to be paid, and knowing that payment is on Friday, that they'll probably get next week. Or lastly, they can see that, wow, this check, your invoice was paid on Monday, which was yesterday. You should get your check by Wednesday or Thursday. Once the workflow is completed, we can then send over a file to your ERP system, letting them know that this invoice has been reviewed and approved, and here is the information about it. And maybe even breaking it down by the general ledger accounts and percentages to be there, or perhaps it's a line items from the actual invoice. Maybe you're doing a PO pull also while processing the workflow. Let's talk about a couple of ways of bringing documents inside of ApplicationXtender. You can natively bring documents, import them, or drag them and drop them directly inside of ApplicationXtender. We have another module that allows you to drag and drop them through a web-based. Some of them have overlapping functionality, and some of it is a little bit different with ECM Toolbox drag and drop. And I'll just call out a couple of those. So if you drag an invoice inside of ApplicationXtender, you can connect and pull some data from the existing data inside of AX. But if you want to go out to an outside database, you could not do that. With the web version of ECM Toolbox, you could connect to your other databases and add more information around that invoice. If you wanted to just allow the functionality of adding records inside of AX, only brand new records, but they can't modify existing indexes, ApplicationXtender doesn't have that ability, but we can set that up with the ECM Toolbox Workflow. Of course, it's obvious that if you're an AX user, you then can drag and drop in. But with ECM Toolbox Web, you could be a non-AX user, have the functionality to add records, and the system will still import and receive those invoices into the system. You can set required fields to be different. So maybe you have more rigorous control over the importing of records. And so the ECM Toolbox website will allow that. And perhaps you also want to put conditional rules that if a certain field is made available, then you check the business rules to determine should another field be made available or other values. I'll show you what that screen looks like in a little while. Another way of bringing records into the system is through advanced data capture. Abby is one of our main software products that we work with to do that. So if somebody is processing 10,000 invoices a month, they're going to look see how they can automate that. How can they have the invoice number, the dollar amount, and the vendor name pulled up automatically off of that invoice and captured, so you don't have a human being doing it? How can you have it recognize and break documents so you don't need to have a human being doing it? You're looking to drive down costs and increase accuracy. So Abby is one of the great softwares that we do use, and it has a module built around invoice capture. Here's some of the benefits along with the efficiency and gains, of course, reducing cost. In the invoices are received, it could be scanned, could be multifunctional printers, could be emails or things I noted before. It identifies and classifies the invoices by the types that they are. It will auto extract the data off of the invoices, and then it'll allow if you want someone to review it, and then that data gets pushed into ApplicationXtender. If you do have a significant number of invoices that are arriving and you're really looking to improve your cost and cut back staff and let them get reallocated towards other functionalities, we should really talk then about Abby, Advanced Data Capture. To go a step beyond that would be electronic data interchange. We have customers that we've worked with their vendors so that there's a stream of data that is arriving into our EDI capture. And what we're doing is, instead of receiving an invoice via email or hard copy, we're just receiving a file with all the information about the invoice itself. We then create a template of that invoice. We put inside of ApplicationXtender. Perhaps we send it out for some people just to review to be notified about it. And then that data gets fed over to the ERP system. So scanning, manual data entry, most basic. And then you go to Abby, advanced data capture, having a lot of it auto extracted to just let's get a data file and let's capture that information and put that inside of ApplicationXtender. So I'm getting close to demoing the system, but I want to talk to you about how invoices are routed through workflow. I'm going to show it to you, but it's also a little easier to discuss that right now. One would be to set business rules on the invoice. So maybe it's by dollar amount or vendor or a combination that arrives inside of AX. It reads that it's Acme Inc. and it's $50,000. And then the system knows to route it from one workflow queue to the next workflow queue. We can also establish a chain of individuals so that if it comes in as for human resources and the vendor begins with a letter D, then it knows that it's going to go to Bob, Mary, and Tom. But if the letter begins with the letter T, then it's going to go from Bob, Keith, to John. And so you can preset that also. The last way of routing workflow tasks is ad hoc. Maybe you don't know the business rule, or maybe you have a special case. Then you can look at it and say, I want to send this invoice to Mary. And then you manually select it and it gets forwarded over to Mary. Everything we're showing is auditable and that's all captured. And so you can go back and see who reviewed it, when they reviewed it, along with it's all secured. We do honor the security inside of ApplicationXtender that people still can only see the invoices that they have permissions to see. Integration. So we do integrate with other solutions, so other lines, business applications, but we also integrate with your different ERP systems. Sometimes we're using flat files, and a common or shared table. Sometimes we are working with RPA. We're looking to send the data into the ERP system and also to receive back the data from the ERP system. And I'll show you a little while about that. Maybe we want to add the check number and a check date and attach that information to the actual invoice inside of AX so you have a full picture of your process. Okay. We are actively working to present webinars on a regular basis to all of our ApplicationXtender customers. These are the ones that will be coming out. Right now we're doing the AP for workflow. If you want to invite other people when we send out the emails to you, please let us know who we can add to the mailing list. We'd love to educate people and show them the power of ApplicationXtender. Great. With that, let's get to the demo and go look at the actual system. Okay. This is ECM Toolbox Workflow. When you first log on, it'll be single sign-on as I talked about against your Active Directory. It'll know who you are and what permissions do you have. What can you see and what can you do? You'll see here, as I talked about, it is really the ability to work across your whole company and improve the efficiency for each department. If paperwork needs to be received and reviewed or electronic images, ECM Toolbox Workflow will do that for you. Over on the invoice routing, you'll see I'm looking at what's called a group box. I talked earlier about a manager being able to see all the tasks that are out there. So I can see right now what workflows are out there. I can see who owns them. I can see the status, which queues are in at that point. Right, we see the workflow starting time. That's when it first was first received, and then the queue when they received it and when they started processing it. We can put row colors to tell you maybe there's a new record that has arrived, or maybe there is an invoice that has reached a certain date. We also have visuals such as icons that can tell you the same type of information, letting you know that it's been rejected back, maybe it's a potential duplicate, or perhaps maybe the payment date is coming up and you want to have a notification there. Again, these data fields can also trigger emails notifications out to you and your users, letting them know certain status about the actual invoice itself. Okay. We talked about receiving invoices, and I talked about EDI, and I talked about advanced capture. There was also the very powerful but standard way of bringing it directly inside of ApplicationXtender. Okay. If you're bringing in the records, you can bring them in as batches, and then you can do your data entry and data capture. What ECM Toolbox has added to that section now is the ability to bring in your invoices and do your capture at this point, but also add in line item information or the header and footer information. So I was actually processing this a little bit earlier today, but you can go in, you can capture your invoice numbers. Let's see here, right? I'll go put in the 141-02143. The batch, it's automatically captured. My invoice date. If I wanted to add additional information, maybe there I have my PO number and I put it 10001. I can open up against a database. I can see what line items and what I was looking to capture as part of my PO information. I can go identify the different fields or different rows I want to capture, and I hit OK. Now it starts populating that information in there directly for me. Perhaps I want to allocate this cost of this invoice out per line item, and I know the first one should be charged against corporation, and the second line item should get charged against technology. Once I'm done with that, and let's give it another version 5, I hit index and route. This invoice now gets moved out and sent over to the proper people based on the business rules, which I'll talk about, and that opens up the next invoice for me to process. So if you are using ApplicationXtender right now for what they call batch processing, you'll note that when you do bring it in, you're able to do your data entry out of the standard AX fields. What we're doing here is we're giving you the capability of allocating by GL accounts or by line items, along with header and footer, and connecting to a more powerful database, which is one of the discrete things I talked about for how we can process more efficiently with ECM Toolbox. Once that has been completed, then it gets moved over to the next queue, and it'll get routed through. We'll look at this one for invoice approval. This is a certain section of individuals that would be processing and reviewing it at this stage of the workflow. I click on it to open it up. Here I have my invoice for O'Reilly. This is the information that was already captured ahead of time by the people processing it. If I want to add more information here, I can go look at it and say, I want to add an item number that's being captured against. It will go out and pull out my description, my quantity, unit price, and total. If I decided that this item number wasn't inside my database and I want to manually type it in, I can do that also. Let's see here. It's got to be inside my database. It's not inside my database yet, which is fine. Then I have my items description, put down my quantity being 1, put out my unit price of $12.99. My total would be $12.99 because it's that equal to, and I want to allocate this to my legal department, and let's say I only want to allocate 50%, right? Then what I can do is I can go back in here and I can allocate out the second 50% here. And I can choose which department this is going to be allocated to. I can say it's human resources and allocate my second 50%. And at this point now, I hit approve, and this will get sent over to the next queue. While working on this invoice, I have the ability to see comments that I've made or other people have made. Maybe I talked to a vendor earlier, I want to put down as a note. This information becomes part of the history against this invoice, along with I can see the other history. Who's reviewed it, when they reviewed it, what steps did they take against it. From the ApplicationXtender side, I do have the ability to go at any point and take a look at the record information. So it will open up and show me a history of this particular document. If somebody's reviewed it, if someone's made modifications or added annotations, I can go look at my workflow history and my workflow comments. So this becomes accessible to anybody that has access to the invoices, and it becomes really powerful. We also have other customers that have added additional tabs up here. So if you wanted to provide your end users with even more information about these invoices that have been processed, we're able to capture that and make that easily presentable back to your end users. Once I'm done, I approve it or I reject it. I close it out and go to my next level for review. I open it up to process this one. What you'll see different about this setup is that we can set the screens up and configure them differently. So with this level for review, this would be the vice president doing a final review. The person is not that interested in the header and the footer and the line items. They just want an overall review that an invoice for a certain dollar amount has come in. They want to see certain information against it. Maybe they want to go look at the history or see the comments, and then they want to process it. But maybe while reviewing it, they decide that they need to send it off to a specific person. What they can do is they can select which queue they want to send it to. They can identify the individual and they submit it. So we talked about routing, right? And I'll talk a little more about that as I look at the admin side. But one of your ways is you can just ad hoc route it. You can have invoices come in. You don't need to be beholden to a set of specific rules. You can allow yourself or your end users to route it through. Some places say they don't want that at all. They want it to have very rigid routing rules, and that can be set up, and that's a big part of what ECM Toolbox offers to everyone also. Okay, what I want to do is I want to jump over to talk a little bit about the workflow admin side. What we look to do with ApplicationXtender and with ECM Toolbox Workflow is to make it so that it is easy to set up and maintain and manage by your business analyst, and that you only have to acquire the technology team at certain points. Here is setting up is the queues that you saw us process before, right? This is the invoice approval queue, which I was in. These are the actual buttons that the end users were working with and the true colors that they're working on. And then you can see, based on the button for reject, that it's going to get sent over to Q20 for invoice entry, okay? You can see that we added icons or colors, so the users that are setting up pretty easily can add information here. If I wanted to add another button, I can go in here and say send to Mike, because I want a special button because Mike always needs to process these type of invoices. I choose when it's visible, a little tooltip. Always goes to Mike. I save that, and I have my button in here, right? This is exactly what the end user will see, even with the mouse over. I can put in conditions in here if I wanted to. I could say that if it's a certain dollar amount, then I want an email notification to be sent out, or if it's a certain vendor. And I might just start off with this one for vendor and say the vendor equals Acme. Then I'm going to take a certain action. What actions do I want to take? I can go in here. I can choose that it's going to go to a certain queue. It's going to go to level 20, invoice routing. And I also want to, when I send it to Mike, it's usually because it's past payment date. And so now I'm going to save that. Along with sending to the queue and forwarding, I want to send another email, or I want to send an email out. Let's do that. I choose that I want to add some additional information about it. So now, not only will this record get sent to Mike in level 20, he's going to receive an email letting him know that there's an invoice for him to process and to review. Okay. This is one of this is how easy it is to set up the workflow, but it's also, you'll see the method of the business rules, right? You can set it up so that each button will drive or send the workflow task to another queue or another set of individuals to be processed. Right. So I showed you how you could ad hoc and send it by one, or that the button controls it, and the button will read the rules, and from there it will send it out and forward it to other individuals. Let's talk about a third way of routing records. So what you can do is you can set up, I talked about it before, HR. If we set up so that invoices need to be reviewed by the HR team, maybe you have two teams, because maybe one team's handling index values for vendor name, right? This is vendor name. And if it starts between A and M, it's going to go to the HR team. And then if it's N to Z, it's going to go to the HR2 team, right? And now who receives that and who's actually going to work on that? So let's take a look at the chains. If I look at the HR team, it goes from Chan to Elizabeth to Jeremy to Daniel Shore. And that it only goes to Jeremy if it's more than $25,000. It only goes to Daniel Shore if it's more than $50,000. So we set up a very specific routing based on certain rules, right? Because when you set it up to route through queues, which I showed queues 20 and 30, you might have 4 or 5 people belonging to a queue, and then it's whoever opens up first to process it will start working on it. Versus you have the capability of being very laser focused and choosing which person gets to process it, and then who is the next person after that that is finished processing it. Once this team has finished their work, it gets moved over to level 20, and Eric is the next person to receive it. And then the workflow, based on what Eric does, there's be another set of business rules determining if the workflow will end or will it go to another party. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about setting up and managing the workflow. We took a look before about the actual routing and process, how to add buttons. You have the ability to add timers. So we discussed if a invoice has been sitting in a queue for more than 5 days, or maybe the payment date is 3 days away. You can work with a timer in there to manage that along with your conditional actions. I showed the ability to add header or line item description. In the past, to go add that screen was requiring a lot of professional services. Now, we set it up so that you can easily come into the system, choose which application you're working with, and now start determining the criteria, whether or not it's going to be visible to your end users, and if it is, what sort of data capture do you want them to have? Do you want them to be able to put in the company name and using a predefined list or a SQL database list? That would be via dropdown. If you wanted to go and have it do a database lookup, you can go through and allocate which is going to be the database, which columns you want to grab for, and which job number or which next column. And then what you do is you map that information from workflow right back into ApplicationXtender. For those that are not slightly technical, this configuration is actually very simple to use. Your business analyst would be able to very simply go out there and configure and set up one of your workflow screens and do database pulls and increase the accuracy and efficiency of capturing line items or PO information against your records. You saw before with the PO information, I typed in PO number and I hit the PO table to automatically pull. Again, that is straightforward of going through, configuring, and choosing which columns do you want to show. So a lot of the ECM Toolbox workflow is point-and-click configurable, and we make it so that business analysts can manage it and set it up all themselves. Here is the line items. All right, if I wanted to add another line item in here, I could call it job number, for example, and I want that to be part of the data that's being captured. I just add that in there, and now job number will show up as one of my line items inside the workflow. Very simple to go through and manage and set that up. Let's go back and take a look now just to show you what that does look like. job number. I just added job number inside there, and now we have a new set of fields that can be captured and then can be exported over to the ERP system. Last thing I wanted to circle back to and talk about was the drag and drop. And just to give you a feel of what that screen does look like. The drag and drop is the ability to take a document from the outside, drag it, open it up, and capture some data against that. So if I wanted to go grab a invoice, I bring it over, I drop it in, it shows me that I didn't capture it. I can already have it open on my other screen. I can put my invoice number onto it. Vendor, it's Acme Inc. My dollar amount. Put in a date, scan date, or a capture date that I want to, and I submit it. This record now will be sent over to, and I'll show you what the invoice looks like here. All right. This invoice that I captured now is drag and dropped it, will be sent over to ApplicationXtender, and we'll have it automatically indexed. It will kick off a workflow, and be sent over to the correct queue. Depending on your settings, people might be notified by email that there's a new invoice to be processed, or they might just be going into their workflow queues on a regular basis, so they don't need any email notification about the record. So to close this out on the process, once your invoices have been paid, we can receive that information back into ApplicationXtender. Some of our customers will ask us to go in here and to receive a note that the check was paid. This one customer would like it to be annotated, so there was no questions in anybody's mind when they go looked at it. Check paid, the check number, and the check date. So it's doing full circle. We're feeding the ERP system with the data, and we're also receiving the data back regarding the payment status for that particular invoice. Now, when you email this or print it, you have the choice of having that annotation attached on there, but it's great information for your internal team.
Interested in what ECM Toolbox can do for you? Subscribe now and check out these videos.